As people who live in the current year, people who disagree with this social justice horseshit as much as I do, have you ever watched friends and family get into a massive fight on your Facebook wall because one of them decided to go on a tirade about white America? Well, that happened to me recently, and I'm still quite annoyed about it. So what better time to address Mike's racist video wagging the finger at white people for daring to claim that they're not racist? Alright, random black snowflake whose name I'd rather not know, you have the floor.
So in my experience...
Alright, let me stop you right there. Let it be known now that I give precisely 0 fucks about your personal experience, or anyone else's for that matter. I'm much more interested in objective reality. Also, some black guy would like the way he wears his hat back. Stop with the cultural appropriation, Mike.
Racist is one of the most triggering words for white people.
Maybe that's because of your incessant attempts to convince everyone that only white people can be racist, as if they are somehow second-class citizens who deserve to be hated simply for the color of their skin. Funny how you don't like this when it's done to you, but you think white people should just shut up and take it when you decide to be a fucking hypocrite.
But are all white people racist? Let me explain using science.
Explain to us some science, huh? Adorable. You know, I think I'm starting to understand why you social justice clowns love the word spectrum, and you're continuing to prove that your ideology is built on a foundation of not only redefining words, but in never understanding their original definitions in the first place. You have the same relationship with the understanding of language that most people have with Pauly Shore. You're entertained for about the first 30 seconds of listening to it, and then just around the time when you should be paying attention to what's being said to you so that you can understand it in context later down the line, you start to tune out until it's nothing but meaningless noise that you want to kill because, for some reason, it just offends your senses. And even though you know the material is out there and have even seen it before, you just can't imagine who would be masochistic enough to study it in such great detail as to construct a well-articulated, abstract framework around it.
Cheddar Wizard!
It seems to me that anytime you people don't want an idea examined too thoroughly, you invoke your nonsensical misunderstanding of the word spectrum. A spectrum is an arrangement of quantifiable, measurable relationships that lead into each other in a linear fashion. This bowl of Skittles is not a spectrum. It is a disorganized collection of objects, some vaguely similar, some with entirely no relation, some almost exactly the same. None have been examined or arranged according to their relationships with the others, and at this point, we can begin organizing them according to whatever arbitrary metric we so choose. We can organize them according to color, sure, but we could also arrange them according to flavor, how clear the lettering of the S still is, percentage of surface imperfections, or even according to those I like versus those I don't like. These Skittles are a spectrum, and the most iconic one of all. These are organized according to color, which is based on wavelengths of refracted light. Taste the rainbow. With an arrangement like this, not only can we confirm with known information whether or not this spectrum is correct as it is arranged, but also how complete it is, what additional members of the spectrum we should expect to find between the colors we see, and what invisible Skittles we would have to accept exist if we were to expand the spectrum from either of its extremes. In this way, a spectrum is objective, and this makes a spectrum, a true spectrum, useful in categorizing things. The social justice gender spectrum is a lot like that aforementioned bowl of Skittles, a gathering of arbitrary labels describing completely subjective interpretations of gender based on a misunderstood definition of the word and an increasing number of deliberately vague and unspecified metrics. And when you people start going around saying things like biological sex is a social construct, we can be sure that this spectrum of yours isn't going to be used to classify anything, let alone attempt to convince sane people of buying into your nonsense. No, this spectrum serves another purpose entirely, which is to reinforce your own beliefs by flooding the discussion with too many unsubstantiated claims to address one by one, convincing yourselves that you cannot be wrong unless all of these genders that you've invented can be discredited. But what you fail to realize is that you're committing a very basic logical fallacy, begging the question. We do not need to disprove each and every one of the genders that you arbitrarily invent, because your entire argument is based on a premise that is yet to even meet its own burden of proof. You either attach unjustified metrics to the definition of gender, or you fail to observe a rigid definition at all, allowing gender to be whatever you need it to be in order to suit your narrative. So before even moving forward from here, I already know that this spectrum of racism is going to be based on a doctored definition of the word which is equally without basis. No doubt you will be heading into privilege plus power territory, a definition that most people aren't going to accept, certainly not the people who disagree with your white privilege narrative. And when two opposing sides cannot agree on the terms before they start a debate, they're no longer even having the same discussion. At that point, it's just a tug of war in your desperate attempt to claim racism as a buzzword for your exclusive exploitation and the justification of your double standard that boils down to nothing more than your irrational hatred of white people.
Short answer, no. Long answer, yes, of course.
Naturally, because fuck white people, right?
A racist is defined as someone who feels discrimination or prejudice to people of a different race, or feels that one race is superior to another.
That's right. But of course, that definition is suddenly in need of lots of social justice editing as soon as it becomes inconvenient for your narrative, isn't it?
You're probably already like, oh my god, but that's not me. Hold the fuck on, I'm not done.
Of course you're not. You people are never fucking done. And nice Richard Pryor-esque white guy voice, by the way. Pinched nasally tone, classic. Not racist at all.
It's like 3 minutes left in this video. Chill.
Yeah, 3 more minutes of you rattling off racist nonsense and trying to justify it. But we're supposed to chill while you browbeat white people, and only white people, with your doctor definition of racism.
A lot of people are probably focused on the latter part of that definition, perceived racial superiority. But this behavioral neuroscientist is focused on the word prejudice. That word is the centerpiece by which the rest of this definition can exist.
I am not interested in your bullshit appeal to authority, nor do I care what this neuroscientist has to say on the matter. I'm interested in retaining a coherent definition of words. And that word, prejudice, refers to a bias against or preferential treatment towards certain people based on one or more arbitrary metrics. Racism is one specific type of prejudice, wherein that metric is the color of a person's skin. And that is why your privilege plus power narrative makes zero fucking sense. Because there is no magical middle ground between the less specific word prejudice and the more specific racism that allows your race to hate someone based on the color of their skin and dodge that label.
Fun fact, humans do have a tendency to create in-groups and out-groups, but they aren't born with prejudice. That's something that we learn. It's a product of nurture, not nature.
The concept you are describing is called tribalism, and it is a fundamental instinct inherent within our species. There was a time before spoken language when the only way we could identify members of our own family or tribe were visual cues, like skin pigmentation, hair color, and facial structure. And in a time before civilization, a time when every foreign tribe presented a threat because resources were precious and we hadn't yet learned how to tame the soil, being able to identify your own and the tendency to not trust those you can't identify both presented an evolutionary advantage to the tribe. This used to be a good thing, because while it did result in death, it also resulted in more being born than those who died. It is the foundation on which we first started to cooperate.
What that means is that we learn it from the people we're around, the people that we're raised by, also known as social contact. Social contact to different people has been proven scientifically to improve cognitive development and cultural understanding overall.
You know, it's cute that you think that just because you can use proper English for more than a few sentences, that somehow means that what you're saying is groundbreaking or mind-blowing. All you've managed to say here is that people are social, tend to agree with those who raised them, and tend to expand their social circles and their agreement when they get along. You are correct in saying that we aren't born with prejudice, because until we've either met other races for ourselves or have been influenced by the opinions of our in-group, we have no basis by which to discriminate. But what you fail to acknowledge is that prejudice comes from experience, whether direct or vicarious. Your racism may be based on what you learned from your parents, and theirs may be based on what they learned from their friends or your grandparents. But at some point in time, someone had to have an experience, whether accurately interpreted or not, that informed their opinion, an opinion that they brought into their social circle. A mechanism that once kept us safe from rival tribes now works against us, because it raises racial tension in a time when we have no choice but to live near each other. For better or worse, it is a part of what we are. But please, do try to explain to us how only white people are racist, despite the concept of racism being older than white people.
Inside prejudice is bias, or the inclination to have certain opinions based on your personal experiences. Whether you think that Drake and J-Lo go well together, or that the 1996 motion picture Space Jam is the best movie of all time, it is. If you're gonna at me, combat me.
Bias is not within prejudice, you lunatic. Prejudice is the result of bias, and bias is a natural human cognitive process, as is perfectly evident in your list of examples. Do you not even find it the least bit indicative of your hypocrisy that you, as a young black man, are so obsessed with Drake and J-Lo, or so enamored with a 90s cartoon comedy about a well-known basketball superstar playing alongside your favorite Warner Brothers characters? Does it not seem the least bit strange to you that the show Friends doesn't show up in those examples, despite the cultural phenomenon that it was among white people of a wide range of ages when you were growing up?
We all have biases, and those biases align themselves to positive and negative emotions, like, wow, I love this, or I hate this. These opinions are based on a multitude of things. For instance, the media, stereotypes, and being around people from different walks of life. I'll say it again for those of y'all in the back. We all have racial biases.
You know, it's not just that you're trying to browbeat white people for favoring their own social circles and cultures over yours, trying to call all white people racist while thinking yourself and your race exempt from the definition of that word. Impressively, you're doing it while outlining a basic human behavior that you admit unites all of us and is the root of racism, while matching the stereotype of both your race and your generation at the same time. You are literally sculpted by your environment, and yet you have the balls to say that white people are somehow more susceptible to this than any other race. Gold medal winning mental gymnastics right there.
So, is having racial bias the exact same thing as being racist?
Here it fucking comes.
In my opinion, nah. Racism is a spectrum, not a binary where you can either be a racist or an angel.
Of course not. And once again, you demonstrate that you understand the definitions of neither racism nor spectrum, because you have completely failed to illustrate the difference between racial bias and racism, let alone establish any coherent spectrum that logically connects one to the other. Is this what you call explaining to us some science?
Take it from Obi-Wan.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
To all who have supported me so far, I apologize for losing your trust and using a Star Wars prequel reference. I'll do better from here on out.
Your pathetic attempt at comedy just goes to show how little you actually give a shit about the gravity of this issue or the hatred that you inspire. Jesus, where's a fucking tomato when you need to throw one?
But he did have a point. Need proof? Let's go take a test. The Implicit Association Test, or IAT, was a test developed by Harvard researchers to examine correlations between certain attributes like good, bad, fun, evil, and targets like black, white, gay, or straight.
The presentation of the IAT test and its findings, as seen through race-baiting channels like yours, has been a complete shit show and a total misrepresentation of the data. Psychology Today's examination of the studies in question found the results to be telling, yes, but not of implicit racism or ingrained hatred. The IAT scores gave indication of the intuitive process of cognition and social bias. That is to say, a measurement of a person's propensity for associating positive concepts with the support structures of the in-group, not demonization of the out-group. As a byproduct, the less familiar out-group is rendered an unknown in a situation that already comes with minimal context and are more likely to be associated with negative concepts by default when little time or room is given for alternative logical connections. When you're being bombarded with unfamiliar faces, your brain can only make a decision based on the information at hand, however little. And when the most your brain is given to consider is skin color, unless you are monitoring your answers with the deliberate attempt to not appear racist, your brain is going to draw on the most primal and visceral source of information it has. As a baby born to white parents, the first faces you're going to associate with feelings of happiness and security are most likely going to be those of your parents and surrounding family. White faces. And that is a feeling that will stick with you on some level for the rest of your life unless some sort of elaborate trauma changes it. There have been people with high IAT scores who show no signs of overt racism, and people with low scores who are obvious racists despite it. And when the metrics of in-group and out-group association are subtly manipulated, the IAT effect seems to disappear entirely. This study proves nothing to your point. I guess when you said you were going to explain to us some science, you meant you were going to do what all ideologues do. Misrepresent actual science to strengthen your narrative.
When I took the test, I showed less racial bias towards any one group, probably because I had a very diverse upbringing with friends and family from all walks of life. That puts me a little bit lower on our racism spectrum.
My man.
That's it, buddy. Pat yourself on the back for that useless test score that means all of nothing. Whatever helps you sleep at night after talking down to an entire race of people on a massive social media platform.
I did have a little bit of racial bias favoring people of African descent, which makes sense because I was raised by people of African descent and spent the most time with them.
The fucking answer is right there in front of you, staring you in the face, and you still can't see it. So I guess when you said you had friends from all walks of life, what you meant to say was that 98% of your social contact was with other black people except for a few Latino or Asian classmates you had in high school, and that handful of white guilt-ridden SJWs who morally flagellated themselves for your amusement in college. That sounds a lot more believable. But yes, surely you're different and only white people are racist.
So yes, it's possible to have racial biases no matter how woke you are or how much you love The Wire. Racial biases can happen both ways. So, the IAT isn't the end-all be-all whether you're racist or not. But if you're like, man, according to this test, I might be a racist, start by diversifying your friend group. Pick up a history book, talk to folks who aren't like you. It's never too late to unlearn prejudice, but you have to acknowledge that it exists first, fam. And watch Space Jam. It's mad good.
Woke, he says. Fam, he says. It's mad good, he says. He tells us to hang out with people who aren't like us while meeting both his racial and generational stereotypes to the letter. He tells us to pick up a history book while clearly having ignored the centuries of hatred suffered by the Irish, the attempted genocide of white Jews during the Holocaust, and the racial injustices done against white South African farmers to this very day. Mike, you might as well be called BuzzFeed too. You are a joke, and if we're ever going to come together and overcome racism, it's not going to be due to the shaming efforts of race-baiting media outlets like yours, but keep lying to yourselves about how you're on the right side of history. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what you saw here, have a look at my other videos and leave me your thoughts in the comments. If you support my message, then please like, favorite, and subscribe. If you'd like to help this channel improve, you can reach out to me on Twitter or on Facebook with any suggestions. And if you'd like to support me more directly, please consider following me on Patreon. Links in the description. Thanks again, and I'll catch you all in my next video.